I have to say that Senator Tim Kaine is everything Donald Trump and Mike Pence are not. He is qualified to step into this job and lead on day one.
Hillary Clinton on why she selected her running mate Tim Kaine during their first joint appearance yesterday in Miami. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Ann Guerin of the Washington Post, syndicated columnist George Will, and Amy Walter from the Cook Political Report. Well, Brit, what do you think of the Clinton-Kaine ticket, and what kind of shape is the Clinton campaign in heading into this convention?
I think the choice was a wise one. It accomplishes a couple of things for her. It begins the pivot toward the center, the inevitable pivot toward the center that candidates always make if they want to win. And it also puts before the public someone whom you can look at and say, yeah, that person could be president, which is important. The importance of the vice presidential pick fades going forward, but for these immediate purposes, I think he fills the bill fine. And I think the Clinton campaign certainly thinks it's in pretty good shape, which explains the fact that they didn't really trot out the Kaine announcement in such a way as to try to step on Donald Trump's convention bounce, because the suspicion seems in the Clinton camp to be that he didn't or will not get much of a bounce.
And you cover the Clinton campaign. I'd like to know what you've gotten from your sources in your reporting. Why did she pick Kaine over Warren or Cory Booker or all the others?
She picked Kaine ultimately because she's the most comfortable with him, and he checks every box. And she didn't feel the need to reach for anything. She didn't feel that she needed to reach for a very, very liberal person who would automatically kind of give her something that liberals think she lacks. She didn't think she needed to reach for someone with national security credentials that are very different than her own. She didn't feel she needed to reach for anybody who had experiences other than her own or came from a different part of the party. And I think that shows her comfort level, to Brit's point, and that she really feels like he could be somebody that anyone could look at and say, yeah, I could see that person being president, and then she never really has to think about it again.
As we discussed with Joel Benenson, there is another big story on the eve of this convention, and that is the leak of thousands of DNC, Democratic National Committee emails that seem to confirm a lot of people's suspicions that the DNC was working to help Hillary Clinton at the expense of Bernie Sanders. Amy, does this have the potential to disrupt this convention and what seemed to be if not an alliance, a growing comfort between Clinton and Bernie Sanders and their supporters?
I think, you know, when we came into the RNC, the question was, how much disunity is there really? And what started off in Cleveland was some talk about the delegates erupting. That didn't happen, but there was still some dissension on the floor. But the disunity continued to build throughout the event, concluding, of course, with Ted Cruz's decision not to endorse and to get booed off the stage. I don't think that's what we're going to see here at all. And in fact, if the reports are true that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not going to speak, that's probably a good idea for this convention, for Hillary Clinton. You don't want any, if you're the Clinton campaign, any attention focused on any sort of disunity. And I think the other thing is, starting tomorrow, you're going to have two people on stage who liberals really do love. Bernie Sanders is going to speak tomorrow night, and Michelle Obama. And that is going to be the focus moving forward. I think the DNC thing is going to sort of fade away.
Before I bring in George, do you think Debbie Wasserman Schultz keeps her job between now and November, or do you think that the Clinton campaign could decide, because of the anger and the sense that all of their deepest suspicions were confirmed, that they'd sacrifice her?
I don't know. I mean, I think if I've learned anything from this year, it's how little the traditional parties have mattered. Bernie Sanders succeeded. He didn't win the nomination, but he succeeded in part because, not just without the party's support, but because he showed us you can go around the party's support. You don't need those big donors and that access that the parties normally give you. You don't need their voter list. You can do it all throughout, whether it's this device and you can connect with donors that way. He proved, really, as did Donald Trump, that the parties have become less significant than ever.
George, we always, I think, assumed that the DNC was working on behalf of Hillary Clinton and to the detriment of Bernie Sanders. Is the leak of these emails a big deal or not?
I don't think it'll last for very long, but it does complicate her presentation at this convention. The kind of people who work for the DNC are political operatives, and they have political views, and they have political careers, and they have an eye for the main chance, and they probably assumed all along that it would be nice to be on the side of the person who's going to win, a person in Hillary Clinton's incarnation who has contacts with all the apparatus of the Democratic Party. So they had a career reason for doing this.
It also, I mean, it's a practical effect, and the Bernie Sanders supporters are going to be upset. If you're looking to elect a Democratic president, wasn't Hillary Clinton a more likely choice than Bernie Sanders to win in November?
Absolutely. And the fact that she won after a protracted struggle probably helped her, and the fact that it made her a better candidate, it always does. And the sense, I think, on the part of the DNC, which, I mean, when do we think about the DNC, or the RNC for that matter? After a candidate is nominated, he often puts, or she puts her own person or his own person in there. We shouldn't be surprised if that happens this time, and we shouldn't think about it very much after.
All right, but for the purposes of today, it's a big story. Ann, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's confirmatory for the Sanders supporters that, you know, there was to their view, there was a finger on the scale all along, and that clearly there was a selective leak of emails that tends to back that up. That is a perception problem. It is potentially a problem when Sanders speaks tomorrow night. It gives people who always wanted to have a reason to distrust this process some evidence to back that up.
But the good news for if you're Hillary Clinton is that the Clinton campaign and the Sanders campaign are in good standing. This is the DNC that is a bigger problem as opposed to it being a fight between these two camps in the way that the Cruz and Trump were about the two individuals.
Chris, this is all kind of a piece with the argument we've had about the superdelegates. The superdelegates represent the party regulars, and there are many more of them as a percentage of the total delegates here than is the case in the Republican Party.
And can we just quickly say, these are people who are not elected as part of the primary process. They're the mayors and the governors and party officials, and they get to go in unbound and be for whoever they want to be.
Exactly right, and they played an important role in Hillary Clinton's nomination, and they did, these superdelegates, in that sense, precisely what they were created, what the system was created to do, which to keep somebody who's out there where the buses don't run from getting the nomination. And it is certainly no surprise when you think about that the Democratic Party apparatus itself would be tipping in favor of the person they thought was more likely to win, and also actually a Democrat, which Bernie Sanders, except for using the party to try to advance his presidential aspirations, is not.
And we should point out there was a meeting of the Rules Committee. We talked a lot about the rules of the Republican convention. There was a meeting of the Rules Committee yesterday. They met for hours and hours and hours about the question of maybe there should be fewer superdelegates. It should be more small d Democratic in the sense that the delegates on the floor have to be actually voted in by real people, by voters. They decided, well, let me just finish, and they decided in their infinite wisdom to appoint a commission.
Yes, don't they always?
But if the net result of this is to reduce the impact of the superdelegates or even the size of their presence here, that will tell us that the superdelegates did exactly what the superdelegates were intended to do in this election cycle, and therefore they're being diminished.
I always hate these rules battles, though, because it's always fighting the last war. We have no idea what candidates are going to emerge and what issues are going to emerge 4 years from now. So this is fun and everything, but let's wait until we get to the next candidate.
You also might see the Republicans think that perhaps they ought to have more superdelegates.
All right. Well, we're going to get to the Republicans in a moment. We have to take a break here.